Money is not the root of all evil. The Bible said the love of it is.
Imagine writing a letter to God's representative on earth. You're sick, you're broke, your marriage is falling apart. You fold a $20 bill, money you cannot afford to lose, into that envelope because you truly believe that Kenneth Copeland will hold your letter in his hands, bow his head, and speak your name before the Almighty. Now imagine learning that your letter was never opened, that it landed in a warehouse-sized room, was heaped onto a pile with thousands of others, and that underpaid staff members mumbled a generic prayer over sealed envelopes before feeding your 20 into a machine that funds private jets, lakefront mansions, and a lifestyle most Fortune 500 CEOs couldn't match. That is not speculation, that is the testimony of someone who was inside the room. A former employee of Kenneth Copeland Ministries walked into a studio, looked directly into a camera, and did something the organization had spent decades making sure no one would ever do. They talked, not vaguely, not anonymously through a journalist's paraphrase. They sat there on the record and described in granular, damning detail how one of the most powerful religious empires in American history actually operates when the cameras are off and the sanctuary lights go dark. From behind the scenes, they witnessed things the public never sees: pressure tactics, financial manipulation, and a culture that prioritizes profit over faith. What they revealed is not a story about one bad decision or a single accounting error. It's a story about an entire system built to extract money from the faithful, insulated from scrutiny by tax law, and enforced by fear so deep that employees were told God himself would punish them for speaking out. This is the anatomy of that system, and once you understand how it works, you cannot unsee it. The whistleblower's first revelation targeted the emotional engine of the entire ministry, the prayer request pipeline. Every week, thousands of letters arrived at Kenneth Copeland Ministries headquarters near Fort Worth. They came from the terminally ill, from parents of addicted children, from widows terrified of losing their homes. Many contained donations, sometimes $5, sometimes $500. The implicit promise, reinforced constantly on Copeland's broadcasts, was unmistakable. Send your prayer request, sow your seed of faith, and Kenneth Copeland will personally intercede with God on your behalf. According to the former employee, who worked in the ministry's mail processing department, staff members prayed over large piles of unopened mail. Neither Kenneth nor Gloria Copeland was personally seen reading the individual letters. The people tearing open those envelopes and scanning those heartbreaking stories were low-level workers earning modest wages. That was as close to personal attention as those desperate words ever got. But the deception, the whistleblower alleged, went further. The ministry used sophisticated computer systems to generate response letters designed to look personally written. To a grieving widow in Oklahoma or a struggling single mother in Georgia, the reply could easily appear as though Kenneth Copeland himself had read her words, knelt in prayer, and written back with a message from God. The former employee said this created an illusion that countless supporters genuinely believed, and that the ministry never corrected. So the money flowed in, and the letters piled up, and the people who sent them never knew. If the prayer request revelation was disturbing, what the whistleblower described next was something colder, something structural. The former employee said that despite hundreds of people working at the ministry's sprawling headquarters, almost none had meaningful contact with Kenneth or Gloria Copeland. There was an unwritten but universally understood rule: do not approach them, do not speak to them casually, do not act as though you occupy the same world. The distance was deliberate, and it created something far more dangerous than hierarchy. It created a culture of institutional silence. Employees kept their heads down. Uncomfortable questions went unasked, concerns were swallowed, and according to the whistleblower, anyone who challenged a decision or raised a red flag understood, without being told explicitly, that doing so could end their career or worse. This was not just one disgruntled person's interpretation. The committee staff report on Copeland's ministry revealed the lengths to which Copeland's Eagle Mountain International Church and Kenneth Copeland Ministries went to avoid oversight. During a multi-year United States Senate Finance Committee investigation, several former employees indicated that the ministry used intimidation in an effort to keep informants from speaking to the committee. One former employee's statement to investigators is worth reading slowly. The Copelands employ guerrilla tactics to keep their employees silent. We are flat out told and threatened that if we talk, God will blight our finances, strike our families down, and pretty much afflict us with everything evil and unholy. Read that again. Employees were allegedly told that speaking out would invite divine punishment, that God himself would destroy their families for daring to challenge God's anointed prophet. Senator Grassley said Copeland and his wife Gloria were not responsive to the committee's request for information. While none of the ministries was found to have violated federal tax rules, many of the findings were not favorable. Among them, Copeland allegedly received an estimated $2.1 million birthday gift from supporters urged to contribute to the cause. As the former employee's revelations rippled outward, public attention inevitably swung back to one of the most unhinged televangelist interviews ever broadcast. Inside Edition correspondent Lisa Guerrero, who had previously made many attempts to speak with the Texas-based televangelist on the controversy over his private jet use to no avail, followed Copeland to Branson, Missouri. What happened when she finally caught up to him became an instant cultural lightning bolt. "If I flew commercial, I'd have to stop 65% of what I'm doing," he said. Guerrero pressed him on his now infamous comment describing commercial airplanes as a long tube with a bunch of demons. "No, I do not, and don't you ever say I did," Copeland responded as he pointed his finger at her. When asked directly about his wealth, he confirmed to the reporter that he was a very wealthy man, pointing to oil and gas investments and reserves on his various properties. The exchange was electric. Copeland's eyes narrowed. His voice dropped to a growl, his face contorted into expressions that launched 1,000 memes and unsettled millions of viewers. For those who had already heard the whistleblower's account, the interview didn't provide reassurance, it provided confirmation. More recently, speaking candidly about the online criticism and the infamous Inside Edition interview that went viral years ago, Copeland said he has learned not to allow public opinion to dictate his focus. His response: "I don't listen to the praise, I don't listen to the hate, I just keep my head down and do my job." The lifestyle surrounding Kenneth Copeland has become nearly impossible to defend on its face. Kenneth Copeland is one of the wealthiest televangelists in the world, with an estimated net worth ranging from $300 million to $760 million depending on the source. Kenneth Copeland Ministries operates a fleet of 3 private aircraft, a Gulfstream V, a Cessna Citation X, and a Cessna Citation Bravo. The fleet is based at Kenneth Copeland Airport in Fort Worth, Texas, his own personal airport, right there on the ministry campus. His lifestyle includes owning several private jets, notably one that was acquired from Tyler Perry for a reported $20 million, and multiple mansions. He lives in an 18,000 square foot mansion on a 24-acre lakefront property near Fort Worth estimated at $7 million, tax-exempt as a parsonage, reportedly costing local taxpayers over $150,000 a year in lost revenue. In 2009, Copeland tried to get tax-exempt status for one of his $3.6 million jets, arguing it was for ministry use. The IRS denied the request, citing concerns over the blending of ministry funds and personal luxuries. And here's the structural problem that makes all of this nearly impossible to investigate from the outside. Unlike most nonprofit organizations, the ministry is classified as a church, meaning it is exempt from filing IRS Form 990, the standard transparency document that allows the public to see how a nonprofit spends its money. Critics argue the combination tax-exempt jets, tax-exempt mansion, tax-exempt ministry income creates a fortress where outside oversight simply cannot reach. Meanwhile, supporters continued to send donations. Many gave sacrificially from fixed incomes, from savings they couldn't afford to lose because they believed they were funding the gospel. They were told their generosity would trigger God's blessings. What they were actually funding, the whistleblower alleged, was an empire built for one family's benefit. The controversy surrounding Copeland isn't limited to money. In 2013, his ministry's influence contributed to a public health emergency. The teachings of televangelist Kenneth Copeland and his family came under scrutiny after a measles outbreak linked to their North Texas church revealed that many of their congregants had not been vaccinated for the highly contagious virus. The outbreak included 21 cases of measles and was started when a person who contracted the virus overseas visited Eagle Mountain International Church. The megachurch's leader, Kenneth Copeland, had promoted the idea that vaccines are dangerous for children and may be linked to autism. Putting emphasis on the power of faith healing, Copeland urged his followers on the church's website to resist the pressure to vaccinate their children. In an August 2010 Believer's Voice of Victory webcast, Copeland discussed having his first grandchild and being alarmed at the number of vaccinations the child was supposed to be given. He called the process of immunization downright criminal. The culture that enabled it ran deep. A former church staff member told CNN that she did not vaccinate her daughter for 6 years due to beliefs permeating throughout the church that vaccines showed a lack of faith that God would protect and heal you. Children got sick because people trusted a preacher more than their doctor. Then came COVID-19. Kenneth Copeland claimed that the coronavirus pandemic would be over much sooner than you think because Christian people all over this country praying have overwhelmed it, before theatrically blowing at his camera to summon what he called the wind of God to destroy the virus. He also compared the virus to the flu and suggested people who attended his services could be healed in person. The pandemic, of course, did not end because Kenneth Copeland blew at a television screen. Over 1 million Americans died. Perhaps the most devastating moment of the interview wasn't any single allegation. It was watching a human being describe, in real time, how their faith was dismantled from the inside. The former employee said they had taken the job believing they were joining something sacred. They admired Kenneth Copeland, they wanted to serve God, and piece by piece through the unread prayer letters, the computer-generated responses, the atmosphere of silence and intimidation, the jets, the mansions, the chasm between leadership and everyone else, that belief was hollowed out until nothing remained but a question: was any of it real? Leaving the ministry, they said, wasn't just quitting a job. It was the beginning of a painful, solitary journey to separate their relationship with God from their experience inside an organization that, they believed, had weaponized that relationship for profit. Deborah Bortner, former president of the North American Securities Administrators Association, told the Senate committee, "I've been a securities regulator for 20 years, and I've seen more money stolen in the name of God than in any other way." Kenneth Copeland's supporters point to decades of global outreach, charitable work, and a ministry that has reached millions. They see a man of God under attack. His critics see something else entirely: a carefully constructed empire shielded by tax exemptions, confidentiality agreements, spiritual threats, and the unwavering loyalty of people who have been taught that questioning their leader is the same as questioning God. The whistleblower's interview did not produce a courtroom verdict or a regulatory action. What it produced was something arguably more dangerous to Kenneth Copeland's empire: doubt. It gave millions of people permission to look past the polished broadcasts, the booming voice, and the confident promises of divine blessing, and to ask the simplest, most uncomfortable question of all. Where is all the money actually going? That question, once asked, does not go away easily. It sits in the silence. It echoes in every fundraising broadcast. It lingers every time a supporter seals an envelope with a prayer and a check inside, trusting that someone on the other end will read it. The silence that once protected this empire may no longer be enough, because someone who was inside the machine decided the world deserved to know what it looks like from the inside. And now, the machine can never be fully reassembled.